Reagan Charisma, 40th President of the United States. Early Reagan. Reagan came from very humble beginnings, as his father was a shoe salesman that was also an alcoholic, which caused the family to move a lot. Reagan played football but earned only passing grades. He was a popular student and was elected to class president in his senior year of high school. In 1932, he graduated with a bachelor's degree in economics. After 1937, for the next 27 years, Reagan appeared in more than 50 films. Reagan was married to one of his co-stars, Jane Wyman, but ended in divorce in 1948. Reagan met the First Lady, Nancy Davis, at a dinner party in 1949, and the two were married. Ronald Reagan, the governor. Ronald Reagan announced his candidacy for governor of California in 1966. Reagan won the election by nearly 1 million votes, and Reagan served 2 terms as governor from 1967 to 1975. Ronald Reagan, the president. In 1980, Reagan ran for president. Reagan fought a strong campaign against George Bush and became the Republicans' nominee for president. He chose George Bush to be his running mate. Together, they easily beat former President Jimmy Carter, making Ronald Reagan the 40th President of the United States. In 1984, Reagan was at the height of his popularity. On Election Day, Reagan and Bush easily defeated their Democratic opponents. Reagan won every state with the exception of Minnesota and Washington, D.C. Reagan was the first president that I can remember as a very young child. He had a huge impact on my life as well as my peers. He spoke about the new generation, and I remember my parents talking with myself and my siblings after many of his speeches. I remember his wife's campaign regarding the Just Say No to Drugs, and now as I reflect back after doing all this research and watching the clips of history, I know why everyone loved him so much. He valued family, and he valued the United States. The Reagan Revolution was one of many coined phrases that was representative of the achievements of the 8 years of his 2 consecutive terms of office. At the end of the 2 terms of office, Reagan viewed with satisfaction the achievements of his innovative program, which was aimed to reinvigorate the American people and reduce their reliance upon government. He stated in one of his speeches that government is the vehicle, and the American people are the drivers. He represented freedom and liberty and challenged the American people to take pride in their government. Reaganomics, aka voodoo economics. The term was used by supporters and detractors of Reagan's policies alike, partially based on the principles of supply-side economics and the trickle-down theory. These theories hold the view that decreases taxes, especially for corporations, is the best way to stimulate economic growth. The idea is that if the expenses of corporations are reduced, the savings will trickle down to the rest of the economy, spurring growth. Prior to George Bush becoming Reagan's running mate, he coined the phrase voodoo economics. And here's a little bit of Reagan's humor and wit.
You've heard, I'm sure, that I like to tell an anecdote or two. Well, life not only begins at 40, so does lumbago and the tendency to tell the same stories over and over again.
His talent at telling those stories was widely admired, even by his adversaries. And he seemed to have one for every occasion.
Governor Reagan, I now declare you to be duly installed as governor of the state of California.
Jack Warner of Warner Brothers, I'd been under contract for a number of years, heard that I was running for governor. I understood that he said, no, Jimmy Stewart for governor, Ronald Reagan for best friend.
I, Ronald Reagan, do solemnly swear that I...
Howard Baker told me on the steps of the Capitol at the time of the inaugural, he said, Mr. President, I want you to know I will be with you through thick. And I said, what about thin? He said, welcome to Washington.
He was a master at the art of wit, his weapon. With a sly, well-timed comeback, he could disarm even the press.
Mr. President, in talking about the continuing recession tonight, you have blamed mistakes of the past, and you have blamed the Congress. Does any of the blame belong to you?
Yes, because for many years I was a Democrat.
His wit rivaled that of his 2 idols, Franklin Roosevelt and Abraham Lincoln.
He liked to laugh, President Lincoln. As a matter of fact, he was criticized for it once, and he said, if I couldn't laugh, I couldn't stand this job for 15 minutes.
Reagan clearly relished the job, missing no opportunity to joke about his favorite targets: communism, big government, high taxes.
If the big spenders get their way, they'll charge everything on your taxpayer's express card, and believe me, they never leave home without it. And if his campaign were a Broadway show, it would be promises, promises.
He won friends and votes by turning his opponent's punches into punchlines.
I will not make age an issue of this campaign. I am not going to exploit, for political purposes, my opponent's youth and inexperience.
He exploited his own age to a fare thee well. On that subject, he was happy to aim jokes squarely at himself.
One of my favorite quotations about age comes from Thomas Jefferson. He said that we should never judge a president by his age, only by his work. And ever since he told me that, I've stopped worrying. Just to show you how youthful I am, I intend to campaign in all 13 states. I've already lived about 20 years longer than my life expectancy at the time I was born. That's a source of annoyance to a great many people.
When things annoyed him, he often used a laugh line to get in his digs.
I was going to have an opening statement, but I decided that what I was going to say, I wanted to get a lot of attention, so I'm going to wait and leak it. So
he quickly gained a reputation as the Teflon president, to whom bad news didn't stick. His ability to charm almost any crowd helped keep his popularity high.
Now, I've been told that this is all off the record and that the cameras are all off. Is that right? Huh? I was told that because I've been waiting years to do this.
The great communicator, he demanded the attention of the American people by expressing a positive and a charismatic leadership style. He had the likability factor, and that helped with other governments to want to deal directly with him. He had a great sense of humor. He was a tremendous speaker. And here is one of my favorite quotes where he gets very angry.
At a Republican candidates forum in New Hampshire, there was a fight over which candidates were entitled to speak, and Reagan was in the middle of it.
Would the sound man please turn Mr. Reagan's mic off for a moment? Would you turn that microphone off, please?
That line became a political home run for Reagan. But where had he gotten it? Perhaps from this 1948 film, State of the Union, starring Spencer Tracy.
Don't you shut me off. I'm paying for this broadcast.
Wherever it came from, it helped Reagan break from the pack that year. He went on to win the Republican nomination and took aim at Jimmy Carter.
I will not stand by and watch this great country destroy itself under mediocre leadership that drifts from one crisis to the next, eroding our national will and purpose.
Reagan was persuasive, but there were plenty.
I've been collecting.
His first great speech was the inaugural speech of 1981, and he basically went through and said, are the bigots listening? Everyone who was born here became citizens legally are Americans. He believed in immigration and the liberty. He definitely was a charismatic leader. Reagan definitely had the inner vision which reflected to his followers, which made him an effective, charismatic leader. Followers of Reagan definitely became emotionally attached, and they did become excited and motivated by that vision. Reagan also possessed qualities of supportive and participating leadership behaviors. He would task and also support decisions made by his staff. And here is his fond farewell on the last days of his presidency, which I am going to skip to the part where he talks about family.
Where's the president in a certain way as long as they continue to act in a helpful manner? If and when they don't, at first pull your punches. If they persist, pull the plug. It's still trust, but verify. It's still play, but cut the cards. It's still watch closely, and don't be afraid to see what you see. I've been asked if I have any regrets. Well, I do. The deficit is one. I've been talking a great deal about that lately, but tonight isn't for arguments, and I'm going to hold my tongue. But in observation, I've had my share of victories in the Congress, but what few people noticed is that I never won anything you didn't win for me. They never saw my troops. They never saw Reagan's regiments, the American people. You won every battle with every call you made and letter you wrote demanding action. Well, action is still needed. If we're to finish the job, Reagan's regiments will have to become the Bush brigades. Soon he'll be the chief, and he'll need you every bit as much as I did. Finally, there is a great tradition of warnings in presidential farewells, and I've got one that's been on my mind for some time. But oddly enough, it starts with one of the things I'm proudest of in the past 8 years, the resurgence of national pride that I called the new patriotism. This national feeling is good, but it won't count for much, and it won't last unless it's grounded in thoughtfulness and knowledge. An informed patriotism is what we want. And are we doing a good enough job teaching our children what America is and what she represents in the long history of the world? Those of us who are over 35 or so years of age grew up in a different America. We were taught very directly what it means to be an American. And we absorbed almost in the air a love of country and an appreciation of its institutions. If you didn't get these things from your family, you got them from the neighborhood, from the father down the street who fought in Korea, or the family who lost someone at Anzio, or you could get a sense of patriotism from school. And if all else failed, you could get a sense of patriotism from the popular culture. The movies celebrated democratic values and implicitly reinforced the idea that America was special. TV was like that too, through the mid-60s. But now we're about to enter the 90s, and some things have changed. Younger parents aren't sure that an unambivalent appreciation of America is the right thing to teach modern children. And as for those who create the popular culture, well-grounded patriotism is no longer the style. Our spirit is back, but we haven't re-institutionalized it. We've got to do a better job of getting across that America is freedom. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of enterprise, and freedom is special and rare. It's fragile. It needs production. So we've got to teach history based not on what's in fashion, but what's important. Why the Pilgrims came here, who Jimmy Doolittle was, and what those 30 seconds over Tokyo meant. You know, 4 years ago, on the 40th anniversary of D-Day, I read a letter from a young woman writing to her late father, who had fought on Omaha Beach. Her name was Lisa Zanata Hen, and she said, "We will always remember. We will never forget what the boys of Normandy did." Well, let's help her keep her word. If we forget what we did, we won't know who we are. I'm warning of an eradication of the American memory that could result ultimately in an erosion of the American spirit. Let's start with some basics. More attention to American history and a greater emphasis